Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are right now. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversations with Dr. Don show. The show is produced and broadcast from Portland, Oregon, USA. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about what we've decided to talk about this evening. And we'll be talking about death penalty debate during 2019 Oregon legislative session. Death penalty debate during 2019 Oregon legislative session. And my guest, a longtime guest, Ron Steiner, and a new guest, Lynn Strand, DMD, and we will go in our usual procedure. The first half of the show we'll be talking about with each of you about who you are personally so that the viewers have an idea where you're coming from and why you have the views you do when we're talking about the death penalty. So in the second half is we'll be talking about that session and what went on in there and how the future looks based on what went on in there, and so on and so forth. But anyhow, let's start off with the bio segment, and we'll do kind of an abbreviated one on you. No, it's been a while though. It's been a while, but we'll just do the whole thing as I see fit. All right? Okay. Ron, if I were to ask your best friend, who is Ron? What would your best friend say? Be your best friend. Ron is?
Ron's somebody who tries to do the right thing. And I've been trying to do that forever, and sometimes I don't, but hopefully more often than not, it gets done. The death penalty effort is a longer journey than I had expected, but we're still trying to do the right thing.
And it's been tireless, hasn't it?
Well, I've tried to keep the energy up over a long period of time. This is not my first rodeo. I did this in New Mexico for 8 years before moving to Oregon.
Glutton for punishment.
No, I think it's a wonderful community service to help educate people about the legislative process, because in Oregon, people don't know very much about it. Since we have a death penalty but don't use it often, and we can get into those details at some time if you want, people consequently do not know a lot about it.
Sure.
So part of our job as advocates for repeal is to try and bring people along and educate them about the real issues that surround having a death penalty.
And there are a lot of them.
A lot of them, yes, for sure.
New question. When and where were you born?
I was born in western Pennsylvania, a small town by the name of Indiana, Pennsylvania. Confuses people.
Indiana, Pennsylvania. Huh?
It's on the eastern or on the western side of the state, about 60 miles from Pittsburgh. Coal mining town, coal mining area that supplied the steel mills in Pittsburgh for decades and decades.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I was born.
Okay. Tell me, why were you born?
Why? I guess, well, one of the stories I like to tell is I can remember my conception, if you can believe that. I can remember my conception. My dad went to a picnic and went home and I went.
Your mother.
You've got a long memory.
Yeah. I went home with I went to the picnic with my dad and went home with my mother.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay. Anything significant about your racial or cultural heritage that's worth talking about here to the viewers?
Of my own mixture, I'm half Italian and half Hungarian.
Mm-hmm.
My mother was a Catholic, and I was raised a Catholic. My father was a Jew, not a practicing Jew, but his family was all, and my uncles, aunts, grandparents were loving, loving people who adopted us just like we were the same as them. No difference.
Do you have a religious preference nowadays?
I still practice Catholicism.
Uh-huh.
Practicing is something we all have to keep doing.
Yes.
It's not a perfection that we've accomplished.
How about your formal education? A little bit about that.
I went to high school in Indiana, PA. I went to college in Allegheny College in Western Pennsylvania, not too far. I had a restricted area, couldn't move away for college more than 90 miles away. That's so I could hitchhike home and help my dad in the store. He is a butcher.
Uh-huh.
Help my dad in the store on weekends and holidays.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to work and thought I was going to be a lawyer. Went to law school for 1 year, working at nights, or going to school at night, working during the day. And I failed the real property course, and then I never went back to finish.
Mm-hmm. How about other education, like the School of Hard Knocks, or anything else comes to mind for you?
Well, I made my living primarily for many years in the television business, and I was a salesperson first, and then a sales manager, and then a general manager. And the education part was accumulated over time, and I continued to learn when I became a teacher and became a consultant to other people on television stations. And so the education part was always a part of it, and I was able to keep gathering things and try and creatively put ideas together that didn't look like they fit together, but when you explain them in a particular way, they become sensible and usable. So my education continues today as I do community service in regards to the death penalty as well.
Interesting how you put that. Yes, yes. So you don't work anymore, you're retired.
Not for money. I still work, but not for money.
Yeah. Do you have a partner, a boyfriend, a girlfriend? I got to ask all the different.
I have a wonderful, loving wife. Her name is Karen Ann Jackson.
Uh-huh.
She's the reason I'm in Oregon. I didn't move here for the sunshine every month, but I moved for the love of a woman. So Karen's very much in in my life. We have a blended family with 6 kids and 12 grandkids and 1 great-grandchild now.
I'll be darned. You're getting old, you know.
Well, it's really my wife's side of the marriage.
Would you comment about your political persuasion, or your left, right, or center, just generally speaking?
I call myself a moderate. I'm fiscally conservative and socially liberal.
Mm-hmm.
Progressive. I prefer progressive rather than
I like that
liberal.
too. Yeah. You're as articulate as you were years ago.
No.
Yes, you are. How about memberships in political, social, or civic organizations? Any memberships come to mind now? I know you have a couple you mentioned before.
No, I've never been too keen on joining organizations. I tried a social, or I guess it's called like a Rotary or Kiwanis or Optimist Club.
Yes.
Service clubs.
Yes.
And just the ability to get to meetings on a regular basis, which they all required, is not something that I was good at because I was always going different directions, doing different things. So I don't have those kind of affiliations. Recently,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a part of a very small but regular men's group. And we have guys that meet together, a small group of guys, but
Sure.
we meet together and talk about serious things, things that we do not share beyond the confines of our group.
Uh-huh.
And it's been very, very helpful for all 4 of us to figure out some problems that we have in our own relationships and our families and the way we address community problems and questions.
How long have you been doing that?
Probably 3 years, 4 years.
And you find it useful?
Very useful.
Yeah.
Some men have a hard time, and I always had a hard time being totally honest with myself and other people, and would hide things to myself and other people. And with these guys, we talk about everything.
And group confidentiality, of course.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm an old shrink from way back, so I know about those kinds of groups, yeah. And I miss them, yeah. So, persons from the past that you particularly liked or look up to, any names come to mind for you, political or social or family or whatever?
I have some heroes. Sister Helen Prejean, who wrote Dead Man Walking, is a hero of mine. William Wilberforce, who was in the Parliament for 25 years, trying to get slavery ended in Great Britain. He's a hero of mine. And then some personal heroes. There was a guy who served on the steering committee that I was in New Mexico for repeal of the death penalty. He was a former state police officer and federal parole officer. And he was elderly, probably 20, 25 years older than I was, but he was on oxygen, and he would drag himself to these meetings time after time after time. And I didn't know he was going to last very long. And eventually, just before we repealed the death penalty in 2009, he did pass away.
Oh, just before? Just
before. So I always admired him and his tenacity, and all of those people have just been at, and maybe that's one of the things I'm admiring, is I've been at it for a long time too, cumulatively. I'm in my 20th year of abolition of the death penalty. And so those heroes are all from that ilk.
And what year were you born in?
I was born in 1939.
Uh-huh.
So you can do the math.
I can't do too good on math. Anyhow, so let us pass on to your cohort here, Lynn, and try some of the same questions on you. You ready?
Ready.
Okay. If I were to ask your best friend, who is Lynn, what would your best friend say? Be your best friend. Lynn is?
A type A, go-getter, efficient, effectual, hard worker. I guess they just say, I just don't stop. I retired 7 years ago, and I'm the proverbial person who just can't retire. I'm busier now than I ever was, and I guess I'm happy about that.
Boy, your eyes say that you're intent and right there.
Most of the time, yeah.
Okay, and I don't know if I want to ask you when you were born, because women don't like that.
I'm okay with that. I was born in 1958, so I'm 60. I'm happy about that.
Oh, you're just a kid compared to...
So I got to do my 20 years a hard time to catch up.
And where were you born?
I was born in Walla Walla, Washington.
Walla Walla, I like that name.
Where they hang people. At least they used to.
Do you know why you were born?
Well, I happen to think it was a God thing. So I don't know if you want to go down that, but I think I was born...
Any path you want to go, dear?
I was born out of love, and I was born to love other people and to be loved. And
that's my chauvinism working when I said dear, so be careful. I'm working pretty hard to get over that.
No offense. I'm going to take it as an endearing term.
It is, yeah. So anything significant about your racial or national or cultural heritage that the viewers may be curious about?
No, I think I'm just pretty average.
You're pretty all right.
Oh, you're kind. I'm Norwegian and Swedish, and I think a little English.
Yeah. And do you have a religious preference now?
I'm also a practicing Catholic. It's coincidental to our cause, but because we didn't, Ron and I did not meet in a Catholic setting, but we just coincidentally both are Catholic.
You see that depression right there?
Yes.
That's from too many mea culpas.
Oh.
A Roman Catholic, ultra boy, many times. So it's simpatico, the three of us going there. And you're a practicing Catholic, and right now I'm agnostic or skeptical, one of those kinds of things. I'm a humanist, I think. But that doesn't include the other species on Earth.
Well, once a Catholic, always a Catholic. You don't have to be practicing to.
In 3 bottles a day. It's not in Latin anymore. So, you're still working?
No, I am a dentist, and I just did root canals, and I had my own private practice in Lake Oswego for 25 years about, and I retired in 2012 because I had a bum shoulder, and I couldn't. I had an artificial shoulder put in, and I just couldn't assume the correct position to work.
Sure.
So just maybe a month or two after, retiring, I decided, you know what, I can't just sit here. So it was just a few months later, I went to one of my first death penalty events. I saw a flyer in our church bulletin and about an event coming up, an annual meeting of ours. And our priest needed a ride. So I thought, well, I'll take the priest. I'll just kind of tag along. And I'd had this curiosity for a long time. Mm-hmm. My sister had been writing to a death row inmate at San Quentin for maybe 10 or 15 years, had a pen pal. And our whole family was really opposed to the death penalty. We had many lively conversations about this, so I already knew how I felt about it, but I had no intention of becoming involved, with this movement. But happenstance, went to the dinner, I met Ron, I met a lot of other people. I heard, really influential people speaking, and on the way home, I told my priest right then and there, I said, this is what I'm on this earth to do. I'm going to do this. And he already knew I'd taken on some homelessness issues and some other social outreach things, but I don't think he even realized at that moment that my decision was made. And since then, fast forward 7 years, he's joined our advisory council, and we've really
proselytizing.
Yeah, moved it along.
Yeah. So, okay. You have a partner?
I have a husband, yes, of 25 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
He's also a dentist,
Uh-huh.
and he's supportive of my efforts to do this.
I got to digress for a second because this afternoon I was in the dentist's chair.
No, I'm so sorry.
And she did some rework again and some more rework. And so it's been on my mind for quite a bit because it's finally, I think, adjusted properly. What you think it's looking okay?
I'm a free second opinion.
Yeah. But anyhow, your political persuasion, you're left, right, or center, or what?
Well, I hate to echo what Ron just said, but
Mm-hmm.
I am a fiscally conservative, socially liberal. I'll say the word liberal. I've been a lifelong Republican, and I don't look at the death penalty as a partisan issue. I don't look at any issue as a partisan issue.
Mm-hmm.
I like to look at the issue itself, and I don't really care where the leader of one party stands on that issue. I'll look at the issues, and I'll look at the candidates. But, with the two-party system, at some point you got to pick a party, and I was 18 when I picked a party and voted for Ronald Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, I think.
I've always thought about what about if there were a real legitimate third party,
Then-
like in some of the other countries, huh?
Then I would probably belong. I might be the first member. These are trying times.
Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations, any of those come to mind for you? Association of Dentists or something?
I'm the president of St. Vincent de Paul for my area, so I do a lot of work with homelessness and with just people struggling to either pay their rent, buy their food, or keep their electricity on.
I'm collecting information here. You're a do-gooder.
Well, you asked Ron, what his purpose in life is.
Yes, yes.
Mine is to make a difference. You know, if the only thing I ever do when I die is that they say the world was just a little bit better for having lived. Because I maybe created some damage too, but I do want to make a difference. And,
Shall we do a kumbaya now before things get too far along here?
yeah,
Simpatico Catholics, do-gooders, people who care enough to do beyond what's ordinary. Yeah. Persons from the past or alive today that you look up to or looked up to or admired. Any names come to mind for your family or otherwise?
oh, there's just so many. It's hard to really say. A lot of
Tick off a
authors. Well, I would say I won't bring up any politicians, but religious people. It would be John Paul II, Pope John Paul II.
Yeah.
Is someone I look up to a lot.
I'm supposed to be objective here.
Sister Helen Prejean.
Yes.
Because I felt that I did the same, I walked that same walk. When you're writing to someone and you have no idea the impact this is going to make, you're just doing it in a kumbaya way. You're trying to just be that nice person, to reach out to that person that's all by themselves, that thinks society wants them to die. So you think, you know what, I can probably send them a nice birthday card and a poem or something. I had no idea of the impact it would have, you know, on my life. So, you know, I was already writing to an inmate when I read her book, but I'd seen the movie, I'd you know, followed
Beautiful
along.
movie.
So I guess she would be my #1 hero in the world.
Good, nice hero.
Yeah.
Any other heroes?
Some professors from college that, you know, moved me along. I grew up in a rather blue-collar, parents didn't go to college kind of thing. And I had people along the way that gave me that, a step up, you know, believed in me early on, you know, 18, 19, 20 years old. And I would have never guessed that I would be able to do some of the things I've done and gone and seen had I not had professors along the way. So
We didn't talk about your education, your formal education, did we?
no, I went to Little High School, Central High in Independence, Oregon. Then I went to Willamette University in Salem, and I majored in biology and economics.
Salem.
And then I went to Oregon Health Sciences University here in Portland, OHSU, and to get my dental degree. Then I decided to move to the East Coast and do a residency in hospital dentistry, just seeing emergency room cases, working out of a hospital. So I got a certificate from Columbia there. Then I moved back to Portland, taught full-time at OHSU at the dental school, and did another residency specializing in root canals. So I kind of went to school for 12 years straight, from 18 to 30. I was slow to launch. But my proudest thing is that I did not incur hardly any school debt or student debt or loans. I worked my way through.
You're really a hard worker and a do-gooder, and
I don't think I'm a do-gooder. That was your description.
that's mine.
Okay.
Okay.
I did not.
I'll take that back.
Okay.
What are you?
I'm just an average person, just
Okay.
focused on a couple things.
Okay. So then, looks like it's about time for us to take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about what went on in that legislative session. So let's take a break. Okay, it's time for us to continue where we left off. Thanks for staying tuned. For your viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don that you're watching is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we have decided to talk about tonight. And we're talking about death penalty debate during 2019 Oregon legislative session. That's a long title, so I read it again. Death penalty debate during 2019 Oregon legislative session. And my guests this evening are Ron Steiner and Lynn Strand. So I have a few prompting questions here. Where do you want to start so we know you want to repeal the death penalty in Oregon? Where are you in that endeavor as of the summer of 2019? Either one of you. Where are you?
I'll start, and I'll give you a little background for that first. If your viewers don't know, and I know most of them might know the answer to this, Oregon is unique among the states that have a death penalty, that it's in our Constitution. Oregon, California, and Florida are the only three. So we don't have a lot of executions here, only 2 in the last 57 years.
Oh my gosh.
So people, I've encountered here, many people say, do we have a death penalty in Oregon? So education is a big part of our task. And we've had polling to ask people, do you support or oppose the death penalty? Mm-hmm. And at the last time we did this, it was pretty close in terms of numbers of people who did and didn't. And then in the middle, there was 8 to 10 people who were undecided and wouldn't fall one way or the other. So if you want to repeal the death penalty, you have to take it to a vote of the people. And to go to the people, you better have a pad in your polling numbers. And we didn't have a big pad. So we had a summit back in May and talked about our situation, that we need to do more education, we need to do something. And some of the outstanding people that were at this summit, and there were legislators, there were former Chief Justice Muniz, former Governor Kitzhofer was there, Mike Farrell from California, who heads up the effort in California, was there, and all of our board members were there as well. So Jeff Ellis, who has been on your show before, and is the top defense attorney for death cases, and former Chief Justice Paul Muniz, who was there, started to think about what could we do legislatively to change some of the statutes that the legislature had put into place and could be changed, that would diminish the ability for prosecutors to so aggressively pursue death. So we developed this strategy, came up with the right framework, went to some legislators who were happy to lead this charge. And so we legislatively took it to this legislature 2019, first in the Senate with Senate Bill 1013. And we had debate and went through the Judiciary Committee and won in the Senate. And then it had to move to the House. Mm-hmm. Well, when I got to the House, they had some concerns about the bill, and they made a couple of amendments, and then had more discussion in a committee, this time in the Rules Committee, and then it went to the House for a vote, and we won there. Mm. So we thought we were going along, and then all of a sudden there's a boycott, and they couldn't make a quorum in the Senate to go back and get a confirmation on the amendments. So we're stuck at this point. So it's political. That has nothing to do with us, has nothing to do with our bill. It has to do with political power or lack of power among the members of the legislature. So we're sort of stuck waiting for the Republicans to come back on their own or by force, not physical force, but
are they
some
able?
Kind of, pardon?
Are they absent without leave?
They are
so
absent without leave, yes, AWL.
So where's your partisanship, huh? Lack of partisanship? It's the Republicans at vote. No, I'm teasing you.
But they are. I mean, it is 11 Republican senators who've decided to either leave the state or certainly go into hiding because of a particular one of the bills that they're not happy with. I believe it's House Bill 2020. But regardless, those 11 senators are gone, and it's holding up 100 other bills that they would likely vote for. The Senate overwhelmingly passed this bill, 1013, 18-9. They passed the bill already. So it just has to go back to the Senate because there was an amendment in the House. So it's just like convalidating it. I mean, it should pass, but if they're not there and there's not a quorum, then the Senate can't pass any legislation, including this bill.
Repealing the death penalty, outright repeal, realistic in the state that requires a vote of the people to achieve repeal?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's just, I'm not sure how soon it could happen, but it will happen. It's happening in many other states, and the number of years that go by that we don't have any executions, it just keeps moving the needle more in favor of repeal. Right now, there are 21 states that have complete repeal of the death penalty. Then there are another 10 states that there are de facto abolition states that have not executed anyone in 10 years, and they basically, like Oregon, don't use it. They have one on the books. It serves no useful purpose. And in fact, it's really harmful because there are still 30 people that are living on death row in solitary confinement in little tiny cells.
It seems like the direction in our government nationally is toward endorsing the death penalty.
No, that's just one person. That would just be President Trump.
What about his coterie, that his followers and the people in the government?
Very much a minority. Around the country,
Sure.
Abolition is definitely what's going on. There is the fewest number of executions were last year. Every year it is going down and down and down, regardless of some of these little pot shots or snippets you hear on the news about bringing back the death penalty for doctors who perform an abortion, or you hear these things. You hear, oh, we're going to have a death penalty for people who traffic drugs. You know, those are just things that people spout off, but that's not reflective of the temperament of the country.
Do you have a guesstimate as to how long it will take before the death penalty is abolished in Oregon? Another 5 years, 10 years?
Oh, definitely within 5 years.
5 years? Whoa.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I'll be there. I'll be there to the end. Yeah.
Yes.
Lynn's point about fewer and fewer executions around the United States. In 1999, there were 99 executions. There were 26 or 25 last year. 15 of the 25 were in Texas, one state.
Oh.
So the rest of the country is not executing very many. Death penalty is losing favor as we continue.
Why don't we send Texas back to Mexico?
Pardon?
Why don't we send Texas back to Mexico? Never mind.
Yeah, well, New
That's
Mexico,
serious stuff, yeah.
New Mexico, when they got rid of the death penalty, their murder rate went down the next 3 years in succession. So it's not a deterrent at all.
Oh, it's encouraging. Now, you have any comments or thoughts about this title, Death Penalty Debate, during 2019 Oregon Legislative Session? Anything that went on that you brings to mind for you what went on during that legislative session?
Well, I feel like a lot of people had a lot of input, which was good to see. We now know who are ardent supporters of the death penalty and who are not. I saw a softening in a lot of people who I wouldn't have guessed. I suspected there'd be opposition in the Senate, and the fact that it went through so quickly, even through the committees, and the vote wasn't even close. On the House side, there was more discussion. It had a little bit more time to, and it was 6 weeks later, I believe, from when the Senate voted. But I was just so impressed with the whole legislative process and the open forum, the meetings, and diverse group of opinions. People who spoke who normally don't speak out against the death penalty. It's nice to see some victims, family victims of people who have been murdered, speak out against the death penalty. And most of the time you think we should have a death penalty because of the victim. We have to remember them. But there were victims that spoke out and said it didn't serve us well. And so that was good to hear. One of our legislators, one of our senators, had a sister murdered, and he spoke out. He was one of the people that helped craft the legislation. So that was good. We also had some attorneys that were looking to end the death penalty and essentially lose their job because they're capital defense attorneys.
Yeah.
But they are so passionate about this that they're speaking out. Now, I do want to make it clear this Senate Bill 1013 does not repeal the death penalty. So we've been talking about it, but it isn't an all-out repeal. The goal of it is to reduce the use of the death penalty and to decrease the number of cases that go on to death row that are tried as capital cases. So in the past, there have been a kind of a long list of what could be defined as aggravated murder. I believe approximately 17 crimes could be considered aggravated murder. And part of the U.S. Constitution says that if you have a death penalty, it needs to be reserved for the worst of the worst. And that is and was a major problem in Oregon, in that it doesn't seem like it really was the worst of the worst. There are some people that are in general population that did not get the death penalty, and their crime seems to be much worse than some of the people on death row.
Does wealth have anything to do with
it? It has
whether or not?
everything to do with it. There are no rich people on death row. Everyone there had a capital defender. I mean, that's across the country. I mean,
So
it's
the
not
direction
unique.
we're heading right now sounds positive for the three of us. And is anything that you can see in those people who have changed and are now supporting abolition of the death penalty? Anything in that population? That's really guessing.
Yeah, I think the important factor is how much they're learning through the conversations. Our efforts have been to educate, so we try and talk about different things that people don't think about. And the people that go to those meetings, and many of them are in favor of the death penalty, they walk away saying, well, I'm conflicted, or I'm not so sure, or I'm switching sides. Because it's just about learning enough about it. Like cost is one of the things. Most people, if they don't know anything about it, say, why are we spending all that money to keep that guy in jail all that time? Why don't we just kill him and then it's over with? Well, the incarceration costs are only 1/31 of the total cost that we spend in this state for the death penalty. We're spending over $29 million every year to keep the death penalty.
To keep those people, instead of
But it's
killing
not,
them, they're stuck.
but it's all in the lawyering. It's all in the appeals process. And so that people don't understand that. So once they learn that, to answer your question, once they learn those things, then they're opened up to say, well, maybe I did learn enough stuff that I'm going to switch teams, or I'm not going to support the death penalty, or take a more neutral position. Some other people, after they have had the conversations enough times, come around to realizing that it's a failed public policy that we're supporting here. And so they changed. I had a woman just the other day. She was at our house, and she had been to lots of our events, and she came to me as she was going away, and she says, and she was a doctor, she was a pathologist,
Mm-hmm.
and she came to me and she said, you know, when I first met you, I was in favor of the death penalty, but I've listened and been to enough of your events and I want you to know I'm now against the death penalty. And that was just one individual, but I think that's typical of why people are changing teams.
I'm curious as to why things are changing in that direction.
Well, the
And-
number of people that have been exonerated is a huge thing.
Yes.
Nationwide, 165 people have been completely exonerated that were on death row by proof, by DNA evidence. They weren't just like
Yes.
released on a technicality or poor lawyering or anything else. They were proven to be actually innocent. So if you look at that number, 165 people exonerated, also look at the 1,500 people that have been executed. We just had the 1,500 person executed a couple days ago. So 165 have been exonerated, 1,500 people in the modern era have been executed. That's over 10% have been exonerated. So that's a pretty high number. The estimates that even 5% of the people on death row might be actually innocent is unacceptable for most people. You can argue whether you think they should be executed or just how you feel about it from a vindictiveness nature or what you look like justice, but I don't think anybody thinks that that's just to execute an innocent person. So that's getting more media attention all the time, the number of people, because of DNA, that have been exonerated. So there's not one message that appeals to everyone. Some people, it will be cost. They'll say $29 million a year. What does Oregon get for it? Nothing. We're no safer for it. We don't use it. It's just kind of a blight on our state. Oregon's not the type of state to actually have a death penalty, so it surprises people that we do. But we do, and I visit death row every couple of weeks, firsthand.
Nowadays you do?
Yes. I go. My inmate friend's birthday is Friday, so I'll make another visit. I coordinate a correspondent group for all of the inmates on death row, so I either know of or know about all of the inmates that on death row.
The people you talk to on death row, are those, what percentage of those admit to having killed somebody? Which of those who are claiming innocence?
One. There's only one case, I believe, that is an actual innocence case that the Innocent Project has taken on and is paying for the legal defense for that case that I know of. Now, some of them may say they had a part in it, but they didn't actually do it. So I know a case pretty well that two people murdered, one person murdered two people. It was a horrible crime, absolutely a horrible crime. But one person was the trigger man. The other person did not know that that person was going to shoot those people. Well, this was 1989, and that was when death penalty was in its heyday. So they both got death row. And it's 30 years now, and they are both on death row. So clearly, Oregon doesn't level who is the worst of the worst. Even in Texas, the person, the trigger man, is going to get a more severe sentence than the non-trigger man. And that's a term they use.
Yeah.
but that's not true in Oregon.
What is it about Texas that has this huge number of people, a percentage of people that are executed, that were
Well, they
executed?
have a huge population as well. I mean, California has the largest death row, although they did just, put a moratorium on it. But they did have 737 people on death row. So California the most, and then I believe Florida, and then Texas. But Texas does tend to execute people in a shorter period of time. Maybe it's, I think, 12 to 15 years.
All things considered, why is that? What is it about Texas? What is it about California?
The Wild West is still alive in Texas.
The Wild West,
And that-
meaning
They carry guns.
Everybody's
Yes.
carrying a gun. They're ready to shoot people if they don't like them or if they get crossed with them. It's just a different mentality. Now, that's not everybody in Texas,
Oh,
because
of
there's
course
a
not.
major movement down there to reduce the use, and it's working in Texas. But their numbers were so huge in the past, and they have this tradition of doing this. Of the 156 or 65 exonerations, not most of them, a lot of them are from Texas. A lot of the wrongfully executed people that they know of, half of them are from Texas. So there's just this culture, the Wild West culture, that still permeates itself.
And interestingly enough, Oregon, when they wrote their death penalty statutes, used Texas as the template. Our death penalty statutes are written after Texas. And even Texas has improved some of the laws that have not changed in Oregon. So that's another reason that we were pushing for some changes in the definition of aggravated murder. First, you have aggravated murder that has 2 or 3 things that qualify. If you murder multiple people and you murder them and you rape them and just torture, all those things, that makes sense. Those were horrible crimes. But they kept adding things to make aggravated murder more applicable or to other crimes. So what the purpose of this bill is, 1013, is to go back and redefine, which crimes are truly the worst.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's kind of hard, huh?
And, well, it was hard. So at first, when the bill was first crafted, it was going to be basically having a death penalty only for acts of terrorism. And everything else would be defined then as first-degree murder, not aggravated murder. But then it was amended. The thought was that that may not pass. So then it was added back that anyone who murdered a child under the age of 14, that was truly a crime that one could pursue the death penalty, not automatically.
How about premeditation?
It always has to be premeditated. To qualify as aggravated murder, it must be premeditated. So I just didn't put that in there, but it always has to be premeditated.
Sure.
Then they added, if you murder someone while you're incarcerated for murder, that's a very serious offense. And then they added back, if you murder, you want me to help you with that one? You're in prison and you murder another inmate and you're already in prison for murder, then that will be eligible for the death penalty, even with this new law.
Personality disorders, we have that rubric, huh?
Yeah.
Because there are some.
Yeah, there's some people that are there that need to be there because there's psychopaths or whatever, and the people in corrections, they know how to deal with those and handle those,
Sure.
and they'll stay there. They're not going to go out in the street. If the death penalty goes away, most of them will stay in prison, but they'll be in general population and can live a normal life. We have now 30 people on the row.
30.
We've got over 130 people who have committed capital murder, the same kind of murder, some of them terrible murder. They're living in life without parole in general population. I was to an event just last Saturday where the African American club that they had, and they had speakers there. There were people from all over the community there, speakers who were former inmates who were coming there and preaching to these guys. This is your opportunity to change your life and come out and be a good neighbor. So people don't think about the other murders that happened in this state that death was not pursued. And there's a couple of cases. There's one guy on the row who's been there for 30 years. His accomplice, who also killed somebody, got a life sentence, life without parole, or life with parole sentence. He's a model inmate. He's finished all his education. He teaches other people. He does community service. And there's all kinds of stories about those people. And they're living the best life that they can under terrible circumstances. When people learn about these things, and they never even had any idea that there are other murderers in there, and they shouldn't be afraid of those people.
And I think when people hear a little bit about people like me that are opposed to the death penalty, I'm not looking for those people who have been convicted of these crimes to be set free or paroled at all. It's our group is called Oregonians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. The alternative is life without the possibility of parole. That wasn't even an option 30 years ago. Some people are on death row that the jury never had that option. It was just 25 years or death row. So of course they picked death row because they didn't have anything in between at that time.
So what's going on now with the legislation is considering a serious alternative to the death penalty?
Correct.
And that's clear enough that it's not, whatever it is, it's not killing somebody.
Correct. That is our goal, is to maintain the moratorium that Governor Kitzhaber did in 2011, and then Kate Brown reaffirmed the moratoria. And our goal is to maintain that and to decrease the number of people that get prosecuted to go on to death row, and then ultimately to repeal the death penalty. But it is a stepwise approach, and it does take years, decades.
I'm not sure I got that number of years left to see this actually happen, but I'm sure pulling for it, because I've always been against the death penalty, of course.
It's possible, and I think we're moving at an accelerated rate of improvement in those numbers right now. We haven't taken a poll recently, but we will soon, and I think we'll see that the numbers have changed. The meter is moving more in our direction as this education process continues to develop.
It is worldwide, and it is across the United States. Just
Worldwide.
the number of countries that have a death penalty. Even Malaysia ended their death penalty recently. So worldwide, there's fewer and fewer, to the point where businesses are talking about not wanting to do business with other countries that have a death penalty. And once a big business, it looks like they're going to lose money because their country supports a death penalty, that can affect trade, as well as other things, like all of Europe doesn't have a death penalty. And none of the big drug companies in Europe will allow any of the drugs made that could be used for death penalty cases.
Hope for my faith in humankind. I don't have to come back as a bonobo or another animal to see a better success rate for this species. Anyhow, it's about time for us to wind down, and I'd like either of you to look at the camera and say whatever you want to so far about what we talked about so far, or any other thoughts as an afterthought. Go on for maybe a minute or so.
Okay, I'll go first. A lot of people have feelings about the death penalty, whether they're positive or negative. But once you decide, or if you decide that you're against the death penalty, it's not enough to just feel that way. You need to do something. And to do something, it can be as small as having a conversation with people at your dinner table in a non-threatening way. Find out how other people feel and engage them. Arguments won't get you anywhere, but to understand why people think what they think. Social media, while it's not a silver bullet, I see huge promise. So I'd say, click, like, share, repost, tweet, retweet with comments, put it on Instagram, anything you can do to keep the word out. If you want to email your legislators, call your legislators, just do something to help move that needle just a little bit.
Ron, please.
I'd add that Lynn's comments are obviously very appropriate, and I would add that we have an organization that embraces a lot of different people. We have a board of now about 12 or 13 people. I just left the board. Lynn is now the head of the board. We have an advisory council of something like 90-some people who are very engaged. So there's lots of places for people to get in touch with Oregonians for alternatives to the death penalty. Our website address is www.oadp.org. Learn as much as you can there. Get in touch with us. Get in touch with Lynn, other board members, advisory council members, and work with us to continue to educate, to inform, to energize and mobilize so that we can make the story and win at the polls.
All right. Thank you so much. Boy, it's been exciting and very fun and very engaging. And wow.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here, Dawn.
Yeah, thank you, Don. Appreciate it.
So looks like it's time for public service announcements. I don't know if we have time for that or not. Apparently not. No, I'm supposed to thank you for watching, and I do thank you. And remember, in KFC, that's important. No, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable KFC. Be kind, and be friendly, and be charitable to you too, and you too, and you too. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.